Hello, and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories to those of the Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthie. This episode will be looking at Happy New Year. Get off our back. It works for this episode, we promise. It's an episode which involves speed dating, but there's a really big part about Make Poverty history. And so we talk about that charity and that movement. So it's an episode of ups and downs. Good day to you, lovely ladies. Hello. That was quite Regency of me. What fine weather we've been having. Actually, no, it's been blooming cold.
Yeah, I was going to say, Frosty McFrostison's out there.
And our boiler broke, so we've had no heating. But the lovely people at the diocese have lent us heaters. So there is one underneath my desk right now, and I am straddling it, and it is glorious.
Oh my gosh. I've been doing that with about 1 million hot water bottles today. Chilly times.
Well, that's one of the things that I've loved this week, has been the glorious heating. What about you, Jenny? Something wonderful from you this week?
Oh, it's a good question. Yes, I do. I have a really good one, which I feel really passionate about, but it is new for me. There's a library in my village, which I'm a member of and try and frequent often. Well, as much as I can, which sadly isn't very often. Anyway, it's another story. I went to my local town library and I was so impressed. It's warm, everyone was friendly, there was tea and coffee on offer, and every Saturday you can go and play board games for £1. I met a lovely family there to do some baptism prep with them earlier this week, and I was like, I can't believe I haven't been here before. So what have I been loving this week? My local libraries, and I am for sure going to be back there so often. I loved it, absolutely loved it.
How about you then, Kate? What's something you've loved this week?
I was just thinking about this. What I've loved this week is I've just been reminded how lucky I am to be where I am. You know, walking my dog and stopping to talk to people. Today I popped into our church cafe, and just how lovely people are and how much they apparently like me. And someone said, I've been talking to the Archdeacon and he's been saying how everyone tells him how great you are. And it's just, people like
feeling
me.
Loved.
You know, I'm feeling loved. I'm feeling love for them. It's nice, yeah.
That's lovely.
Oh, that's a really nice thing. Much better than I've had many complaints about you.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Those seasons
the way my brain works is like, they're saying that now. Just give them a few more years. Just give them a few more years and they'll hate you. Yay, mental health.
Another thing that we've all enjoyed today, although we recognise that this will be difficult for some people as well, today's the day that General Synod, which is the kind of governing body for the Church of England, has voted to use prayers to bless same-sex couples in church. And that's news that all of us are really pleased about, and we know others will feel differently about it. But I'm riding on the high of that today for me.
It's such a positive step forward. It's not the end goal, but you know, we can only move forwards from here. So,
yeah,
I think by the time you guys listen to this, it will be news that's been out for a little while now. But just a reminder, you can always dialogue with us about this. We're interested in what you think, and what you feel, and if you want us to do, to talk more about it or to unpack things, then that's what we're here for, and that's what we'd love to do.
Exactly. Go find us on our various socials.
Yeah.
Kate.
Yes.
What are we doing today?
Right. So, what we're doing today is we are reviewing an episode. We haven't done that for a while. We actually planned to do this one for our New Year's episode, but we got a bit distracted by other things. So we are reviewing the second part of the Very Dibley Christmas set of specials, and it's called Happy New Year. So these specials were in straddling 2004 and 2005. The Merry Christmas episode, was it a Very Dibley Christmas?
I think it was Merry Christmas.
The pair are called A Very Dibley Christmas. Sorry. Merry Christmas, which was about Geraldine's 10-year anniversary in Dibley.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I can't remember anymore.
It's
so long.
Go back and listen if you want kind of a bit more of a sequential understanding of what's just happened. This was the New Year's special. It's called Happy New Year, and it's Geraldine's 40th birthday, among other things.
Yeah, but it's not that New Year-y, is it? It like that's not particularly talked about. It's just a way to set up this episode. So we don't care. We'll do the Happy New Year one in February.
Well,
deal with it.
It's our New Year. It's a new year of a podcast. And also, I would say this episode is a bit more Valentine's themed. Maybe you could
appropriate
because
we did it deliberately.
There is no actual New Year's content in this episode, so you could make an argument. Maybe if we told you it was a Valentine's episode, you would have never known.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, we're going to do something a bit different here because this episode does something a bit different. We're going to start with a joke, which we usually have right at the end. So here's a joke. It's a Valentine's joke. Not to brag, but I already have a date for Valentine's Day.
Oh, do you?
Oh.
Yeah, it's the 14th of February.
Oh, that's so bad. Oh dear, yeah. Oh, whereas that was terrible, but also clever. Whereas the joke that is done in this episode is my favourite joke of the series.
Yeah.
I think Jenny accidentally saw a different version that had a different joke. But there we go. Never mind, Jenny. Which meant that when we were planning this episode, she had a complete panic that she had watched the wrong episode. So we don't know what happened there. But never mind. So where are we? Of course, we're in the parish council. That's how these episodes always start. Well, no. This one started with a joke.
But they start after the intro song with a parish council.
Parish council. That's where we're at. And we have discovered that parish council happens every Wednesday. That's that's the regular.
I didn't think this was news. I thought we knew it was every week.
We didn't know the day.
Maybe we didn't know the day of the week. Now
I don't think I processed that it had been every week.
You know,
that does
Wednesday
sound like a lot.
Feels sensible. Like, it feels like a Wednesday meeting.
Yeah, I previously, in my last church, our staff meeting was on a Wednesday. Because you're past Sunday and the busyness of that and looking forward to the next Sunday. So, good job Wednesdays. Yeah. No hump days here. No. So they're meeting, and one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that it's coming up to the 20-year anniversary of Live Aid. So for people who've never heard of Live Aid before, it was something kicked off by a guy called Midgure and Bob Geldof, but you probably remember Bob Geldof more than Midgure, and was in 1985 was a kind of movement where there was a massive famine in different parts of Africa, and there was a massive movement to raise money and awareness of what was going on. And Live Aid, which was a concert which lots of bands performed at, was a big part of that. And also the Christmas song, Do They Know It's Christmas, which you might recognise. That was all a massive part of it. And it's a significant date for me because Live Aid, the 13th of July, 1985, was when my parents were married. Oh. So whenever it comes up with the anniversary of Live Aid, I'm like, oh yeah, Mum and Dad. So they got married, went back to the hotel room, and my dad watched The Who.
That's amazing.
So, so Geraldine wants to do something significant for Live Aid. And we're going to skip over kind of quite a lot of the talking about Live Aid and Make Poverty History, which is a big part of this episode because we want to talk about it more at the end as a whole set. So we're not going to interrupt coming in and out with different things.
So what also happens in this parish council, a couple of highlights. We have Geraldine mentioning her life-size vibrating model of Justin Timberlake.
Yeah,
which
that was a
deeply inappropriate Geraldine.
I mean, that's a special shop you get that from, isn't it?
Like, if you're doing that on your own, all good strength to you, but maybe not mention it a parish council. Is she just doing it to rile David up, I wonder? David is...
Does she actually have it?
Well, we never
Or is
see
she
it.
just messing with them?
I think she does. I think this is setting the scene for her. I think she absolutely does. And I think it's setting the scene to talk about relationships, singleness, sex, sexual intimacy, but
Indeed.
most of all,
things.
relationships.
Well, yes.
Potentially.
As a kind of functional part of a storytelling, it's trying to set up Geraldine's desperation here. We're being told Geraldine is so desperate for intimacy that she's building a sex doll.
No,
Let's call it what it is.
It might
It's
just
a sex doll. It's
Oh gosh,
a
it's all got very
life-size
heavy
vibrating model
very
with
quickly.
a crotch.
To be fair,
I mean,
what does vibrate? Is it the whole thing that vibrates?
I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, this is Geraldine.
Okay.
She's
It alludes to strange things, doesn't it? But I don't know. You might change my mind, but I'm not sure about the desperate terminology used there.
I think that's what we're trying to be. That's what they're trying to tell us, because we come across this a little bit later in the episode, with what the parishioners decide the big problem in her life is. Because the framing of this episode is that Geraldine is turning 40, and she doesn't want people to know this. Hugo's the one who brings it up. He says there's a big birthday coming up. And when Geraldine punches Owen when he keeps talking about her birthday, she punches him quite a lot in this episode.
There's a lot of violence towards Owen in this. Somewhat justifiable.
Somewhat justifiable, but Geraldine maybe needs to have some anger management classes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the big thing is that Geraldine's turning 40 and she's not happy about this. She doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. So the whole episode, there's two different plots running, which is about Make Poverty History, and Geraldine wanting to push the parish council and the village to get involved with it and create a committee in which people can do it. And so she's asking them to write letters to the PM, and people forget who the PM is. And there's also this whole line about Geraldine turning 40 and what they're going to get her and what she needs in her life. And we all have talked about how it's a weird mesh of these two things. It feels a bit like they had this plot of wanting Geraldine to do a thing that she does later on. And they've just tied it with Make Poverty History. And it feels a bit weird.
Yeah, or they had this idea for Geraldine's 40th birthday. And then we'll talk about Make Poverty History later. But this episode was the launch of the campaign in the UK. So... whether they already sort of had this plot of the romantic plot started, and then realised that they wanted to bring in Make Poverty History. Anyway, it's a really weird pairing.
It is. Yeah. I do agree. It is a weird pairing. It is an unusual pairing, but in a way, I feel like that kind of makes it a really diverse episode, which made it, I don't know, like kind of more varied in a way that I actually really remember this episode. Like I know we all have our favourite moments and stuff, but this is an episode where I'm like, oh yeah, it's this one, and it brings back a lot of different feelings for different reasons. But it does always feel like every time I watch it, I see something or hear something new about it.
That's interesting, because I remember the end bit really clearly of this episode and had completely forgotten about the other bits of the episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, we keep teasing this, don't we? So let's actually get on with it.
We'll get back to another reflection with later.
Yeah.
But
we're back in the vicarage.
David Horton is giving off season 1 villain energy in this meeting, because he does not think that they should be writing letters to the Prime Minister. He thinks it's a waste of time, and he doesn't think anyone's going to join Geraldine's subcommittee, does he?
Yeah, I hate the way he says, oh, it's a, your goody-goody meeting for... I'm like, oh, that's so gross, when actually ending poverty is probably one of the most important things we can dedicate our lives to. Gosh, that makes me angry.
Yeah.
So what does Geraldine do?
But Geraldine, she knows her patch,
She
and she
does.
bribes them with Jaffa cakes. And to be honest, that would work for me too. I would join a sub meeting if I was promised Jaffa cakes as part of it.
Noted.
Note.
Yes.
Note for ministry, always promise Jaffa cakes.
Yeah, especially to Ruthie. She'll do things with Jaffa cakes. That sounded weird. Let's move on to the vicarage. And the T-shirts are back.
The T-shirts are back.
Yeah.
Yay! And they are filling the plate with Jaffa cakes, and Geraldine is sneaking Jaffa cakes at the same time.
Yeah.
She knows she knows who's coming. She knows they will eat all the Jaffa cakes as soon as they arrive. As they're filling the plate with Jaffa cakes, Geraldine is talking with Alice about age and ageing, and Alice is just being really offensive, but also super hypocritical. We've worked this out. So
we've done research.
We did maths.
I did not do the maths.
Jenny thinks that we're massively overthinking this.
I do. And I love you for it, but I sat back and just watched the chaos and glory.
Because Alice basically says if you're older than 30, 32, you're completely past it. And we were like, how old is Alice? Because here's things we know about Alice. In 1997, she says she's known Hugo for 26 years. Yeah. Since then, she has had 10 children. Which we assume maybe a child every 10 months.
I mean, she's got to be cracking on with this unless she's got some twins and triplets in there. But when the whole gang are there together, they look like they're all a variety of different ages.
So it's 2005. So she's maybe had a child every 10 months. It's 8 years. We think she must be around 34.
Yeah, because, it's 2005 this episode comes out. So she's a hypocrite.
She's a hypocrite. But
or you're overthinkers.
Or it's like the magic of TV where Bart Simpson has stayed the same age for 30 years. Time is all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey thing.
She thinks Geraldine's in her early 30s, though, which I guess, that's nice of her. If we could use Alice's kind of standards for guessing age and the value she approaches, she assigns people based on their age, I guess.
I have to say, I am terrible at guessing ages. I hate it when I have to do any guesstimating around age.
Yeah. I just make a joke about how young I look, and therefore I'm terrible at guessing people's ages.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So Alice is rude about Geraldine's age, and then they carry on talking because the committee that's come together to talk about Make Poverty History are on their way, and they talk about the song "Do They Know It's Christmas Time?" and ask the question, "Did they know it's Christmas time?" The answer is yes, very much so. There's some of the largest Christian population is in Africa, and therefore yes. They would know very much that it was Christmas time in December.
They know it's Christmas.
So the gang turn up, the rest of the boys turn up, and they've all written their letters for the PM, and they're of varying quality. Owen and Frank read theirs, and it's not great, but Jim reads a really, really beautiful letter. And of course, because it's Jim, it's got lots of no's in it, but without all the no's. He says, no more children dying, no excuses, no more. And that's his letter to the PM. And that's a really lovely moment.
No more children
memorable
dying,
moment.
We do know how to save their lives. No excuses, no more.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Jim's letter. I observed it's also written on the back of a cornflakes packet, which I found really interesting, and maybe I'll get onto this a bit later, but it's, Frank's letter's written on a big sack of paper. Owen's is written on a piece of paper that he's had folded up in his pocket, and Jim's is on a torn up piece of cardboard from a cereal packet. It's really clear to me that Jim is very much presented as being less affluent than the other members of the parish council. And we've seen his house before as well, where it's not in good repair, and he and his wife have to sleep in waterproofs because there's a hole in their ceiling in their roof, raining on them on their bed. So
I hadn't picked up on that. And I think I just thought of him going, here's a bit of paper, I'll scribble it down on here because I've forgotten. But then you've just reminded me in the episode where they write the Christmas hymns, that they come up with the new Christmas hymns, carols. He writes it on a cardboard box, doesn't he, and things like that. So...
And it's interesting because it is when he took out his cardboard cornflake packet, there was laughter in the background because it is played as like a funny thing, and so it's hard to tell if that's just him being a bit quirky and a bit last minute and disorganised, or like you say, if he hasn't actually got access to paper. But the other thing I noticed from just before this scene began is when the boys came in, they went straight to the Jaffa Cakes and they rinsed the Jaffa Cakes. And I was just thinking, although that is, again, it's played for laughs and it's funny, if this was a real live meeting, I would be thinking, oh my goodness, they might not have enough food at home. And I guess with cost of living, like, you know, we have to be alert to people who are going to refreshments and, you know, stocking up their pockets with the biscuits and stuff, and just, do you know what I mean? And just keeping an eye on how people are doing. And for me, like, if that had happened, I know it was played for laughs again, I don't want to take it too seriously, but on a note of like actual, you know, thinking about poverty, and poverty as being history featuring in this episode, and maybe poverty locally, which I think we're going to come on to later. I was like, oh, that would be a real red flag in terms of wanting to spot people's needs and where they're at.
And I think then if this is as deep as we're reading into it, which it probably isn't, I think there's something incredibly profound about the fact that Jim is the one who has latched on so quickly to what they're meant to be doing. And he's the one who empathises the most with the campaign. And I think that's true, that often people... I mean, as we see it with David, he really struggles to empathise with these needs which are so distant from him.
Yeah, he's just so privileged, isn't he? That he just doesn't get it. But
I often see, I think we often see in our ministry, that the people with the least often give the most.
Oh, it's so true.
It's a whole widow's mite that Jesus observes.
Some of the churches in the poorest areas are propping up the diocese with their giving, which is, you know, the parish share is one of the things that Church of England churches pay to the diocese for all the kind of running of the diocese and stuff like that. And often it's, you know, people in poor areas are giving much more than those in much more affluent churches who do have the money and resources. That's not always the case, but is sometimes the case.
It's definitely something which happens enough for us to notice it. So if they're being really, really clever, then that's what they're doing. Otherwise, they just thought it would be funny to have Jim say no. They like using Jim to start off something funny and then make it something profound. They've done it a couple of times. They've done it a few times already in the show.
Yeah. So these letters have been written, and then we move on to the other plot in lots of different ways, where we head to Horton Manor because Geraldine is turning 40 and they're all trying to decide what to get for Geraldine for her birthday.
And it's really interesting seeing them all in Alice's version of Horton Manor. Alice has completely decked out Horton Manor in pink and fluffy, sparkly stuff. And the last time we saw it, this was a disagreement with David Horton. He was not happy about this, but he looks quite comfortable now. I certainly look quite comfortable on that sofa.
He's embracing the pink.
He's resigned himself to his fate.
So they're trying to work out, and one of the things that they suggest is involves Mel Gibson and getting Mel Gibson over here for a particular deed. And all the conversation seems to revolve around the fact that they think that all of Geraldine's problems would be solved if she had a boyfriend. And as a great lover of Disney, this is often the Disney way of doing things. And there's that brilliant scene in Ralph Breaks the Internet where the princess turns up amongst all the princesses and they talk about, all the things that have happened in their lives. And then she's like, are you guys okay? And then they ask the question. They're trying to determine if she's a real princess, and they say, does everyone think your problems have all disappeared because a big strapping man has turned up? And she's the main character's like, well, yeah, what is with that? And that seems to be their thoughts, is that if a strapping man turns up, everything will be fine.
You can sort of see Alice's reasoning, because this is Alice's idea, and Alice has trouble seeing past herself and her own experiences. And Alice is in a very comfortable position. She's had her happily ever after. She's found the love of her life. She's got Hugo, and she feels like all of her problems have been solved. I can understand why she then wants to project that onto Geraldine, and she wants Geraldine to have her happy ending as well.
I think, just Geraldine in the PCC meeting at the beginning of this episode, does she intimate that she is sad about coming to 40? Yeah, she does. She goes, it's okay to turn 40. Loads of women still find their love after 40. Loads of women go on, and she's consoling herself. So although you're right, I think Alice is projecting a bit. I think she's picking up on Geraldine's heart, which is like, oh my gosh, I'm scared about turning the big 40, because all the things I felt like I wanted, all the desires of my heart haven't occurred yet. And I'm nervous that my age is gonna, not allow me to experience those things. But yeah, you're right. I think Alice does pick up on that even more.
Geraldine does want a boyfriend. Yeah. She wants a partner. She wants someone to love and someone to be intimate with and all this different kind of stuff. And that is something that she wants. They just go about this the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, have either of you ever been experienced being set up by parishioners?
No.
Yeah, fortunately not. I was dating by the time I started in ordained ministry, and then got engaged about a year, 6 months into being ordained. So that wasn't a problem for me.
Whereas I kind of had sort of that experience, like not full on. I did have someone who wanted to set me up with her son, but I managed to escape it. But what I also had was people being like, I was going to go on a Christian young adults holiday, and someone was like, I know you're going to find your husband.
Oh, wow.
People really concerned about me being single and wanting me to find
someone.
Really? Yeah. And it's really like, I know by this point the Dibley Council are a bit more Geraldine's friends than they are strictly just parish, but it's still really uncomfortable to be in that situation. Like, to be honest, even just normal friends doing that for me, I wouldn't want that. Unless I've explicitly asked someone to set me up. Like, yeah.
It's very private.
They've got a good heart, haven't they? They've, their heart's in the right place, but as so often the folks of Dibley, their heart's in the right place, but they mess it up and get it wrong.
Makes for great TV, though.
It does.
Does it, though?
It does.
Yeah.
Well,
I hated this part of the episode.
Oh, really? Let's unpack it. Let's dive on in there.
Yeah. So they decide, after Alice informs them about speed dating, to get a voucher so that Geraldine can go speed dating. And then we cut back to the vicarage where they're giving this gift of a speed dating voucher. And Geraldine goes through a series of motions about it, doesn't she?
It's a whole range.
Yeah, she goes through feeling offended, feeling hurt, but she kind of ends up being excited.
Yeah. I was at the hairdresser's today, and they know I do this podcast, and they were asking what we were doing today, and I said about this and about the speed dating and that she gets a voucher. And my hairdresser was like, "What would you do if people gave you a voucher like this? Would you go or not?" And my immediate thought was like, "No, of course I wouldn't go." But she was like, "Why not? Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, I'm very happily married right now. That makes it sound like I'm about to not be very happily married.
Right now.
But
Be
if
warned.
I'm hedging my bets.
Editor.
No, I love my spouse very much. But would I have ever gone on a speed dating gift from parishioners? I don't know.
I think I would have had to, because then they would have been like, oh, did you have a good time? And I wouldn't have been able to have the heart to say I threw it in the bin or to lie about it. So I probably would have had to go. But the thing is, I think Geraldine, in the end, like you say, she does come around to it and she's happy about it. Because I think she's like, okay, new experience. Maybe this will be good for me. I'll put myself out there, which I deeply commend.
Yeah.
It's like, probably, you'd kind of feel like you'd have to go. Because as you said, Jenny, they've paid for this for you and we're going to be asking you about it.
Yeah.
I, in Geraldine's situation, would probably try to change the date so it's not on my birthday. So that if it didn't go well, and also that type of social situation is not something I'd be comfortable in. I'm not spending my birthday doing that.
You could go round, well, it's booths for the speed dating that they do, and be wearing a party hat and have a balloon and walk in each time.
Yeah, great
and
conversation starter.
Wish you happy birthday.
Oh, is it your 17th birthday? That's what I'd be asked.
Oh dear. So they give this gift and it's arranged for her birthday and she's going to go. But as everyone's leaving, David says to her about the Make Poverty History stuff again, and just says, do you know what? Does anyone care? Is there any point in doing this? No one's going to listen to us. And I really admire David's honesty in this.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that, I've gone through when trying to get people to do stuff as well.
It captures the mood of people, I think. Which, you know, for better or for worse, it's good to have that on TV, and it's good for that to be examined almost, so that it can be rebutted.
I don't know if what David has to say is wrong completely.
Yeah.
I think he's wrong to be defeatist about the idea that we can't get people to care. But he's right that people do care more about there being traffic lights being put up outside Sainsbury's than the fact that 30,000 people are dying of extreme poverty.
But then that's made to be like, well, isn't that horrific? Because although it's true, that is horrific.
Yeah.
And it's actually only when we're confronted with what that looks like that our hearts are changed. You know, that whole kind of, Lord, break our hearts for what breaks yours. We're so occupied with, the new roundabout going in on the junction opposite Sainsbury's. It's going to make the commute longer. That actually, like you say, the 30,000 people falls by the wayside. It's
difficult talking about this now because the social and political landscape of the UK now is a bit different to 2005. And I think a comparison now, it's very different now, because what we're looking at now is we've got the war in Ukraine and what's happening in Iran and all over the world. Those are our big things we need to be worried about and we should care about in the world. But then at home, we have the cost of living crisis. We have people unable to heat their homes. We have an unprecedented need for food banks. So if David is speaking today and he's saying the people I talk to are far more concerned about, what's happening here in our village, that's understandable. But that's not what David is saying, because it kind of ties into this very Thatcher politics, which says you're supposed to focus on what's happening around you more than kind of caring about the big problems across the world, and you can make that kind of change in your immediate circles. I'm probably completely misrepresenting this, but that's kind of where you can see David's more concerned with the local, but also only really concerned with what's affecting his immediate circle. So the traffic lights affect him and therefore he cares about it.
Yeah, true.
And it's not until Geraldine links what's happening in Africa with his own grandchildren that he starts to empathise.
Yeah, that's true. That was an important shift, actually. And like you say, that's coming back to something you said earlier, when David's empathy switches on, which I think is really interesting. But I feel like just before we get too deep and delicious into this area, we catapulted out again into a funny scene. So we come back from this seriousness and thinking about local, and it is funny because they parallel obviously local and the local panic with the road versus, you know, actual people in poverty. But then we're catapulted back into speed dating where we meet. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, just for this episode only, isn't it?
Yes.
A very special character.
Yes.
It's Miranda Hart.
Miranda Hart, who is someone
lovely.
we all adore as
She's
well.
a good load of fun.
You know
She
what?
can't get her on
We
the
should
podcast.
do an episode about Miranda. I know she's not a TV vicar, but we should do a
be.
Miranda
But
episode.
there's a lot of vicar stuff in it, the kind of world that she talks about. You know, her mother tries to set her up on a date with a vicar, and there's a very funny funeral scene. Yes, we'll do a Miranda.
We'll do a Miranda
okay.
episode. Yes.
Brilliant.
Miranda's a Christian
yeah.
as well, so there we go.
Yeah, she is.
Nice.
She loves the Lord.
Well,
yes.
in this one, she loves the guys and girls.
Oh,
Yeah,
she loves setting people up.
Yeah.
Miranda's
so-
character is it Sally or
Susie, I think.
Susie? Yes,
Yeah.
Susie runs the speed dating centre from the looks of it. And she greets Geraldine. And Geraldine has arrived. She's looking lovely, but she's wearing a
looks
clerical
beautiful.
collar. And Susie advises her to take the collar off.
Let's just pause here for a moment. If you were to go speed dating or on a first date, full stop, wouldst thou wear your dog collar?
No.
And
Absolutely
reasons why.
No,
Absolutely not.
no, but I have gone on a first date where I wore, like, it was a dress which was a clerical dress, but I'd unbuttoned it slightly so it didn't look like clericals.
Oh.
So I could have whipped it out if I wanted. I could have whipped out the clerical collar if I'd wanted to.
Okay.
Like an
you for
emergency
clarifying.
pastoral visit on the way
Yeah,
home.
emergency pastoral visit.
It is
Also,
like
it was a
putting
really
on a
hot day,
super-
and like that was one of the only appropriate dresses I had for that weather.
Yeah, no, I probably wouldn't wear my collar for dating. But
No,
Is it-
as Susie says, it's a little bit of a stop sign.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
many bachelors or bachelorettes, or in between, would look at a clerical collar and think, "Oh yeah," and if they did, you
Well-
might not want them.
Yeah.
Well, true.
There's the potential that it's someone who's a bit fetishizing.
Yeah, can I just mention on the dog collar front, it's if you're a police officer, you wouldn't wear your uniform. I know vicar is a vocation, it's a lifestyle, it's more than a job. But at the end of the day, your dog collar is a piece of, I suppose, in a way, I know it can be viewed differently, but it is sort of like a uniform. So I guess it doesn't necessarily
People get
make sense.
into that.
I know.
Uniform dating.
Yeah, just not sure it's helpful in finding a beloved scene.
Well, in an episode we'll look at much later, someone enjoys the dog collar and finds it rather sexy. So it could have worked, but in this case, well,
It was
So-
a
shall we see?
Geraldine rips off her bib stock. A bib stock is what's called that little, when you got that little piece which is just sitting underneath what you're otherwise wearing. And she goes the complete opposite route, where she is boobalicious.
She is boobalicious.
In her defence, if you've got boobs, you've just got to wear them.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. But
Yeah.
also, I do find as well in women's wear, there are some items of clothing that I have that I would only wear with a bib stock because without them, it's like, whoa. And so you don't almost have a choice, do you?
Yeah.
So she might have gone through her dresses, surprise speed date, go through dresses, look. Oh my goodness, I can't wear this on its own. So the bib stock has to go in. But like you say, as soon as, I was going to say Miranda, as soon as Susie's like, ooh, a personal point, not sure about the collar, she whips it out and then all of a sudden there they are.
Now, like, she knows,
There
like,
they
they
are.
look wonderful, and she looks wonderful, and that was intentional. Like, she's never been shy about her bosom.
Do you think?
And she shouldn't
Yeah, I
be.
suppose.
But
Oh, no.
then, what she then does is then she further unbuttons her top. Which
Once she meets the competition
she
in
reveals
inverted
her
commas.
bra, which I think for me, that's where I'm more uncomfortable, is her then deciding to reveal her undergarments.
That is a move, because we meet Hetty, who's also, well, we think she's a single woman looking for love. Turns out she's got a couple of guys that she's kind of seeing anyway. And I think Geraldine suddenly feels a bit more threatened on the dating scene. So she thinks, right, well, might as well throw caution to the wind and advertise the woman I am. And
get the girls out.
The buttons come a little looser.
Geraldine's internalised misogyny for how she treats Hetty. She does some very thinly veiled insults disguised as coughs, and she slut shames Hetty for the fact that she's seeing a couple of guys. She doesn't say she's dating any of these guys, but she's talking, she's seeing a couple of guys, and she's also speed dating, and for how she's dressed. And then she comments on the fact that she doesn't have much of a bottom. It's not women supporting women, Geraldine. It's not women supporting...
Geraldine feels very insecure and a bit jealous, and I think she does make quite a funny comment about Hetty's hips being the same level of her as her boobies, because they are great with weight, so they are perhaps a little bit lower. And then and then Hetty is super tall. She's got height on her side, and it's all just too much for Geraldine. She's in a vulnerable place as it is, so I do feel sorry for her, because when Hetty's like, oh, I've been seeing this guy and then I've seen guys, but none of them are quite right. I can imagine Geraldine be like, what? How come you get all the men and I don't get any? It's like a child in a way, isn't it? But you're right. What she says is not holy. It's not kind.
It's not holy. It's not kind, and it's just not. It's like that same level of when you're reading a romance novel and a main character decides to massively insult her love rival, and call her a slut because she dresses, skimpily, or it's not cool. I mean, obviously this is 2025, but it's not 21st century dating, and I'm really disappointed in Geraldine here.
Oh, yeah, we hear you.
But we're not disappointed in the talent, because we hear there are many gentlemen for these two ladies to go see, and we meet the first one as we go through door number 1, and lo and behold, there's Steve.
It's Steve.
Yeah, who is a
model.
He is a model. He is a model who is traditionally very good looking. And immediately, Geraldine is smitten on him. And he says all the right things about, has dated the wrong sort of girl, and he's just looking for someone.
A real woman.
A real woman. And immediately, with my Jane Austen senses tingling, I'm like, this man is too charming, he is suspicious. But Geraldine really hits it off with him and has a nice chat and
lies.
You hated the scene,
so
didn't you?
So I hated this scene completely, because Geraldine lies about who she is. She misrepresents herself. She does what she does quite a lot, where she starts basing her personality around what she thinks the man will be most attracted to. We've seen her do this before, and I really hate that for her. Last time it was her bleaching her hair, so that David's brother would be attracted to her because he said he'd like blondes, and now it's lying about what she does. And
I think it's because Susie's probably put her off by saying the dog collar thing. So she probably panics. Actually, my identity, I do need to change it in order to be, attractive, as it were. So she goes to say Vicar, but she goes Victoria Crossmaker, which I don't think is necessarily for his benefit. As in, I don't think he'd like, ooh, a Victoria Crossmaker, how delicious. But I think it's because she didn't want to reveal who she was. She's obviously feeling insecure about her identity, which, as you said, has been a factor, previously.
But there's ways,
and
to
something we've experienced too.
Yeah, but there's ways to.
Yeah, definitely.
There's ways to conceal that you're a vicar. I've probably been the one who's been online dating most recently. And what I would say on my profile was that I was a church worker. So I'm not lying. I'm just not fully... And then after I'd been but talking to someone for a little bit, then I'd say, oh, by the way, I'm actually a vicar. I don't like sharing this out too much because one, it makes me faster identifiable and easy to find. Mm-hmm. Also, I know it's a bit off-putting to some people. You know, you kind of want to ease people in to the idea. But yeah, there's ways to conceal without it being complete deception. Let's maybe not include this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she tells some porkies about who she is, but the time comes to an end and she's feeling really good about how things have gone, and so can't wait to see who the next bloke is. And so she walks in to the next door and it's Jim.
Just reliving that moment. So good.
Which, first of all, where's his wife? Has his wife passed away by this point? Or are they just going for an open relationship thing? And
I think we've known, there's been evidence, hints, in previous episodes, really from the start, that Jim has not been the most faithful partner, whether his wife consents to that or not, because he's mentioned having had liaisons with Letitia.
Maybe, hopefully before marriage, though. Am I naive to assume that? As in, like, before he was meant to be faithful? I don't know, I want to believe Jim's a good dude, but you're right, he does talk about, and in this episode also, he talks about some of his most sexually exciting times being with women over a certain age,
and the kind of the availability of condoms and the condom machine at the pub. He indicates that maybe his side of the marriage is open. Again, whether or not his wife consents to that, we don't know. Anyway, Jim is there, and I think we then get a good indication of how the rest of the speed dating is going to go.
Absolutely, because after Jim we then get Owen.
Oh dear.
And Owen's dressed up for the occasion, but absolutely not. And then next of all we get Alice and Hugo, who are suggesting a menage a trois, which is
tasteful.
she says no to. And then after that we meet Dave, also known as David.
He's wearing a ridiculous shirt.
And he's sat on his chair backwards as well, and all this.
Yeah, this is the beginning of David's. I think this is the beginning of David's. Oh my gosh, I actually like Geraldine. Spoiler alert for the coming episodes.
With his stay.
No, maybe
we've
that was too small for me. That word.
We've
talked
about this before. Dave is.
Dave.
Maybe he was hoping that he was going to be the only one of Dibley to be there.
Maybe.
And he was hoping that he and Geraldine would hit it off. But
it doesn't happen that way. So this is the last of the speed dating, and they all meet back together in the room, and Miranda, also known as Susie, is very pleased because there's one person, there's one couple who put themselves forward as a definite match, they've said the same name for who they'd like best, and Geraldine gets all excited because she thinks, it's going to be her and Steve, and
so painful.
Yeah, she jumps forward like, woo, let's do this, and it's Hetty and Steve, and so the exact person that Steve says he wants to avoid and doesn't want to date anymore is the person that he chooses, and so they go off on a date, and Geraldine is devastated.
Yeah, cut to back at the vicarage, and Geraldine's sitting on the stairs drinking wine.
Yeah,
again.
And there's that kind of song over the top. I will never marry, I'll be alone, or I will never be anyone's wife, I'll be alone all my days. Which is a song in a previous life of mine I have found and played and also drunk wine along to.
Oh, Jenny.
Jenny.
I've lived that reality in my own life and just been like, you know what?
Dear.
I embrace this.
And Geraldine says that's what I called a very bad birthday.
Oh, it's so sad.
And
it's poo.
It's why I agree. She shouldn't have gone on a birthday.
Yeah.
Like, as much as it was a birthday gift, like, that's just...
Yeah.
But, you know, it could have gone really
It
well.
could have
Of
gone
course
really
it didn't,
well.
because it's the Vicar of Dibley, but
Yeah.
she's had a bad day.
Yeah.
She's had a bad day.
And then there's a knock
Sorry.
on the door.
It's maybe about to be a good day. Who
Maybe
enters?
someone's going to turn up. Is it Simon? Is it one of her previous love interests? Is it Daniel Frobisher? Well, now that would be a
Oh,
twist, wouldn't it?
Daniel Frobisher. Oh, God.
We need to do a review of all her romantic interests at some point. But
Oh, yes.
it's Alice and Hugo dressed in
Oh.
kilts.
Yeah.
And
Swinging away.
They have decided this is plan B. Since they couldn't find her a romantic partner, they're offering to give her a baby via Hugo.
Alice pimps that Hugo, essentially.
Yeah, and not only is this deeply uncomfortable and inappropriate, but they make it worse by making it exceptionally clear that Hugo is not attracted to Geraldine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame.
And the reason they're dressed in kilts is because they think Geraldine's attracted to Braveheart.
Yeah. Mel
Is
Gibson in
Alice
Braveheart.
in a kilt as well?
Yeah.
She is. She's got
Oh, is
like
she?
a
I
little
missed
denim
that.
skirt
Yeah.
kilt number. It's cute.
Right, that's cute.
And is this an actual nightmare? It feels like a nightmare. I was hoping she would wake up and it would have been a nightmare.
No, it is not. She politely declines. And
And
goes
then
to
Alice
the door.
starts to nearly cry again, though. This is, when Alice gets upset, the Christmas lunch incident where Vicar's like,
Yeah.
now let me tell you a story about a friend. But Alice is like, but this is our birthday present to you. It's in like, you can't say no. And we're all thinking, oh my gosh, how is this going to turn out?
Alice is an emotional terrorist. Let's name it. She's an emotional terrorist.
She just has a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
She knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing.
No, she doesn't. That girl is pure sunshine and innocence, I'm sure of it. She just feels
Anyway.
deeply. She doesn't know how to process it.
Geraldine is saved by another knock at the door.
Oh.
And who is it?
The
Back up.
alternatives.
The alternatives.
Yeah, just in
It's
case.
the boys
It's the
in their
Yeah.
kilts. Jim, Owen, and Frank turn up, and they all flash the vicar.
It's true. Not straight
Frank
away.
is the most surprising offering.
Yeah.
But yeah, they
So
all
what?
offer.
Yeah. They offer, what is it? Just in case her Vicar didn't fancy being impregnated by Hugo, she gets a choice of the other guys. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Which
a
is
bit like
very
shag, marry,
thoughtful.
avoid, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, shall we do that? Oh my gosh, right now, right here. Ruthie, I'm going to come to you first.
Marry Frank, avoid Owen, shag Jim.
Nice. I would
No.
marry Hugo, avoid Owen, and do rude things with Frank.
There we go. There's something not. for the
Moving on.
podcast.
Yeah, might need to cut that out.
Yeah, so the boys flash her, and she just says no and go away. And I think that's for the best for everyone. She sends them home to go get changed because it's the last meeting of the Dibley Make Poverty History Committee.
Yes.
Poverty Action Committee.
Dibley
Is that what they're called?
Poverty Action Committee. So
Yeah.
they all gather in the vicarage living room to talk about what they're going to do. They've had some time to think about ideas. Owen suggests a very radical solution, which is they round up all the rich people in the country and kill them.
Not idea.
Communist revolution
Communist
from
Yeah.
Owen.
And the Hortons ask whether kind of how rich is rich, and he says, "Oh, anyone richer than David and Hugo on the first
On
day."
the first day.
So
Yeah. Jim has a particularly creepy response where he wants women of a certain age and a certain ethnicity to come and live with him, which is just really wrong. And then Frank suggests setting fire to himself in protest.
Not ideal.
Mm.
No, not their greatest responses. So,
although, and I do want to say, Jim's is the most aside from the creepy factor, Jim's is the most practical in terms of offering aid because he's offering to share his home He's essentially saying, "I'll welcome refugees." It's bad because he's essentially wanting
he's not
to
a good
groom
candidate for it.
He's not a good candidate, but, it's the most practical of the suggestions.
Yeah. Once again with him, great heart, bad execution. And so Geraldine says and turns to her computer and looks up some stuff online and goes to the Make Poverty History website, and there's a click this link if you're undecided about whether to support it, because she's wanted to give them white bands and stuff to wear for it. And so they click the link and watch a video which is harrowing footage, and I really clearly remember watching this video. It's about a brother and sister whose parents have died of AIDS, and the sister is now... Oh no, the mum has died of AIDS. The dad's really unwell. The sister's caring for them, and I remember really clearly the little boy sobbing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
the sound
tears.
Of that.
Yeah, it is harrowing to hear, and you feel it, and it goes on for quite a long time as well. Yeah. Like it's not like a little part. But they're two children absolutely broken by the fact that their mum's died, their father is deeply unwell, and they're just so sad. And you're right, it's the sound of their crying that you can't mistake for anything else apart from, like, just the saddest thing you've ever heard in the world. Yeah. And I have to say, ever since I first saw that episode, even when I watched it back for this episode, I found myself crying. Like I think I'm getting a little like teary now.
Yeah. And
really
the
hard
video
to hear.
The video finishes, and Geraldine apologises because she didn't realise how hard hitting it would be. And they turn round, and everyone's wearing their white bands and are fully on board with it. And the episode ends with instead of the usual kind of video and joke and that kind of stuff, it ends with a montage of the characters from Vicar of Dibley all wearing white Make Poverty History merchandise feels the wrong word, but
symbols.
You know what I mean? Symbols.
Bands and supportive.
And there's also a final line where Geraldine says, "This might be the best birthday I've ever had."
Yeah, and them wearing the bands is cut with footage of people in poverty, and that's how the episode ends. And so now we want to talk a bit about the Make Poverty History movement and this way of raising money and things like that. And Kate, do you want to kick us off with some thoughts about it?
Yes. So Make Poverty History is a really core memory for me. 2005 was when I was really getting started with being recruited into leading in my youth congregation. In fact, I think the Make Poverty History youth service we had was one of the first times I was in the youth band. I remember exactly what I was wearing. I was wearing my new pink Converse, and I was wearing a pink top. And anyway, it is core memory. Like, we were heavily involved with this as a youth group. Make Poverty History launched in 2005 in the UK with this episode. It was a coalition of trade unions and charities across the world, which was lasting 1 year, with the aim of ending poverty, particularly in Africa. It was focused on a rally in Edinburgh in July of that year, which would coincide with the G8 summit, demanding that the G8 leaders would make poverty history. In February, Nelson Mandela spoke to 20,000 people in Times Square, and there were other global summits throughout that year focusing on global poverty. The G8 meeting resulted in increased aid and reduced debt, but there was no movement on trade justice or workers' rights, which was one of the other hoped outcomes of this coalition of trade unions. The UN summit for the world's poor, which I think happened later that year, had some disappointing outcomes. And then there was a World Trade Organization ministerial, which also had uninspiring outcomes. This is according to the TUC website. There were 8 promises made by the G8 leaders. The first was to double aid to Africa. The second was to double aid from the EU specifically. The third was to drop the debt. And the fourth was universal AIDS and HIV treatment. The fifth was to save 600,000 lives a year by protecting 85% of the people at risk from malaria. The sixth promise was to eradicate polio. The seventh promise was universal primary education. And the 8th promise was to stop corruption in the oil, gas and minerals industry by improving transparency. We're almost 20 years on from these promises being made. Some of these have been achieved to a greater degree than others. Drop the debt was quite successful by its own standards. 36 of the 39 eligible countries participated in this programme, but not all of the poorest countries were eligible. So a lot of their national budget still goes towards paying off their debt. Polio's been one of the other more successful stories, and universal primary education was also, as of 10 years ago, on track. Corruption in the oil, gas and minerals industry, let's face it, nothing's happened there.
It's unbelievably frustrating, and that's putting it mildly. Like, some of the stuff that's happened has been really good and has moved things forward, and the rallying call to action for it, and I think lots of this kind of stuff that happened then was quite a, well, it wasn't just a youth movement, but I remember being really influenced by it as a young person. I think we're seeing that again today with climate change, that it's young people who are really pushing forward for it, and that's an amazing thing. As we know, being part of the Church of England, change never happens fast. And it's immensely frustrating.
I think it would be interesting to see 20 years on whether we do a 20-year anniversary of Make Poverty History and make the push again. There were criticisms of the movement at the time, and in retrospect, one of the main ones at the time is that the wristbands which were produced and sold, which everyone wore, some of them were made in Chinese sweatshops.
Oh man, that's messed up.
Which is completely counter to the whole point of the movement. Also, it was a coalition of organisations outside of Africa rather than anyone from African countries themselves, which undermined the local governments to an extent. And it also sort of ties into greater criticisms of this type of activism, which focuses on, particularly on Africa, and it kind of ties into this white saviorism, a sense that, well, we need to fix things for people. You hear it if you listen to Do They Know It's Christmas.
That's just
incredibly condescending. It's still colonialism, because it's saying we can do things better than you can. And admittedly, most of the problems, let's not include this bit, caused by colonialism originally. But there's this criticism as well in the way that, with that video that we have at the end, which draws people into empathising with those videos we have, when in the UK we have Comic Relief, we have Children in Need. there's been increased criticism of this method, which is very emotive and it does get you involved. It gets you wanting to give, but it's been described as poverty porn, and the attitude is, oh, you know, isn't this so sad for them? And aren't we glad it's them and not us? That's a direct quote from Do They Know It's Christmas? And particularly from a disability community, which is where children in need more focuses, this type of fundraising doesn't change the systematic inequalities which cause the problems in the first place. Instead, it actually reinforces this idea that our social services in the UK, if we're thinking about the UK, need to be propped up by big drives for giving and charitable action. It also normalises traumatic power imbalances. And it's just, over the past almost 20 years since Make Poverty History, I myself have become more uncomfortable with the way that this activism is done.
I think the trouble with lots of this is hindsight is an amazing thing, and we mess up and we get things wrong, and we can look back and do that. I don't think, maybe I'm too naive, but I don't think the intentions were to be going in as white saviour and, you know, rescuing all of Africa. Because I think if we look back on our history, we've made massive mistakes in different things. And, you know, you look at the work of someone like Mother Teresa, actually, the way that she ran her orphanages nowadays we look back and go, that was really, really bad. Yeah. But we're humans and we mess up and we do things as we can do at the moment. And yes, we don't always get it right, but you know, we do as we can. And I think particularly here in the UK, we like things like these big events to do stuff. And I think we like doing big events, and whether that's with charity things or like building up to things like the FA Cup, we like big events for things. And if that's the way it motivates people to give and to encourage knowing stuff about the state of the world, that's how it works for us in culture. And I'm not saying it works always, but actually that's how we work as a society at the moment. Yeah, does that make sense?
The huge success of Make Poverty History was that it raised the awareness so much, and so many people became passionate, even if just for a short amount of time. The downside was we've made poverty history. You know, it was kind of, the coalition was for 1 year. And then it ended.
Which is, it's
not something which has been revisited year on year and year on year. And I mean, I don't get me wrong, I don't think Make Poverty History was a bad thing. In fact, I think it was incredibly good. But if we ask the question now, looking back on, did we make poverty history? Or, you know, looking back on what happened to make poverty history? Especially now when we've got so much inequality on our doorstep. You know, and I think one of the things that made me uncomfortable watching this episode was just knowing how many people in the UK are using food banks. Yeah. You know? And it's like, if this was today, how do we reconcile? I mean, I imagine Jim and his family would be using a food bank. And as I was reimagining what this episode could look like, because I don't think that the speed dating subplot should have been paired with it. I don't think it was the most effective pairing. No. I think you could have had a really interesting discussion about local poverty versus global poverty, and how actually it's not either or when it comes to tackling poverty. We should have as much empathy for the people who are our neighbours as the people who live on the other side of the world.
Yeah, I think picking up on that, I think you're right, it is both and I think for me that's what the takeaway from this episode is. Like, I do agree with some of your comments about kind of, I can understand why there was criticism about Make Poverty History, but I do think that actually it's right for our hearts to be broken for, you know, people in our community as much as it is for people on other sides of the world. And I think the video really shows that beautifully. Coming back to David's comments earlier in the episode where, you know, coming back to that scene where he's talking about, he's way more shocked about the roundabout coming in than, you know, people dying. And I think a modern equivalent for us, we've just had, you know, obviously there's wars going on around the world, there's earthquakes in Turkey, Syria, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess we should pay attention. And then you read the news and you see the videos and you hear of the death toll numbers and it wakes you up, because otherwise I think it's so easy to not be bothered or distressed or to cry out in prayer because we're so far away from it. And then I feel like, for me, like I did some digging. One of my young adults said, oh, hey, what are we doing about the earthquake appeal? Are we collecting? Are we raising finances? Like, what are we doing? And I was like, in my brain. And then I was like, better find out a bit more about what's going on and what's Tear Fund doing? What's Christian Aid doing? Okay, what can we do? What can we get involved with? And then I obviously I know I have compassion myself, but I felt guilty as well. I was like, what on earth am I doing? Death toll now is over 11,000 people. And like, how am I going to choose to respond to that? And when I was watching the videos of children being pulled from the rubble, and it did make me think, oh my goodness, imagine if that was my community. I've got a parish of 6,000 here. That's all of them gone. And again, that parallels kind of what we're saying in Dibley. And I think it's right that these videos are good. I don't quite agree with that emotional pornography phrase that you used. I don't quite understand that, because it is nothing better, I think, than having our hearts enlarged and our consciences stretched. And I don't know, and having that for our local community, yes, and for others on the side of the world, I think is it's as you were saying, Kate, it's got to be a both and thing. It's
difficult as well, because I agree with both of you that actually it's the images that often hit home, and people, it's the thing that make people realise, oh, this is an actual human being. It's not just a number. And there was the story from the earthquake in Syria and Turkey about a baby that had just been born underneath one, and the entire family had been killed, but this baby had survived, that, you know, was hours old. And stories like that, we are people who like stories and storytelling, and those are the kind of things that hit us and hit home. But yes, we can use that in exploitive and unhelpful ways.
It's just one of the tragic realities of humanity is the images which humanise causes for us dehumanize the subjects of those images. Yeah. And we'll never win when it comes to this.
It's a tough one.
So to draw a close to this episode, we recognise that it's a lot of ups and downs in this. And we've gone through some really big emotional stuff. And so following the pattern of the episode, we've done our joke at the beginning. And instead of kind of signing off in a certain way or making a joke about it, instead, Jenny's going to offer a prayer for us.
So, Lord Jesus, you call us to be your hands and feet, that we may join in with what you are doing in our communities and around the world. So direct us as we renew our commitment to end poverty, and inspire us to continue to bring about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. In what feels like a huge task, give to us your reassurance, your strength, and above all, hope, that you will use us as we are, where we are, for your purposes, near and far. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.